Grab your cup of coffee. Sit down for a story. Let's all go exploring. Making it after 40. Making it after 40. Making it after 40.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Making It After 40 podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Rodriguez. I'm an actor and writer who is still trying to make it after the age of 40. On this show, we explore what it means to be an artist trying to make it as a middle-aged person. I know we had an extra week between episodes, so thank you all for standing by while I work to get this one out. This week's guest is Kris Demeanor. Kris is a musician and sometimes actor based in Calgary, Canada. Kris also happens to be the husband of prior guest Deborah Willis. If you recall, Deborah is an author and her book Girlfriend on Mars came out recently, and it's doing fantastic. Kris shares how his father's passion for visual arts ended up influencing his own exploration with music. We discuss how lifestyle choices can impact creative freedom and your ability to make the art that most feeds your soul. Kris has a new album out called Songs for My Father to Fall Asleep To, and you can listen to this album on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. Now, here's me and Kris chatting it up. Hi. So today my guest is Kris. Kris, oh wait, why have I forgotten? I think I remember everybody by their Instagram handle, so I'm like Kris Demeanor. Mm-hmm. But is that your last name? Demeanor?
Well, no, that's my smart-ass stage name.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I'll let you introduce yourself. Kris is an actor, a musician, an overall artist. He dabbles in a lot of things. But go ahead.
Well, indeed, my professional name for about the last 25 years has been Kris Demeanor.
Okay.
But I was christened Christopher Wolfgang Gunnar Wenzel.
Oh, wow. That is quite the name. I mean, that's
actually, now that I think about it, that's a way cooler professional name to have, if for no other reason than to make people say all four names.
Yeah. But that's really awesome. Well, we were chatting before we started recording, and we were getting into some really good or really interesting stuff talking about avant-garde. I met Kris. I was introduced to Kris through Eric Moscapetis, who was on the show at the end of 2022. And then Deborah Willis, Kris's wife, has been on the show, and her book is like doing so well. I'm so excited for her.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's a great success. And then so then I wanted to have you on the show because you have such like a unique situation as well with your art. We were talking about avant-garde art in general. And so I was going to say, I actually did pop up to Calgary in 2000. No. Yeah. In 2000, like the winter of 2000. So I've been up there. It's been a long while, but
it is.
That's when I think Eric was like first meeting his like people, and he was like starting to form his theater troupe. And he
had a series on the go called Mutton Busting.
Yes, I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was presenting sort of short, strange snippets of music and art and theater in a little room during the High Performance Rodeo.
Nice.
Yeah.
And how did you meet Eric and Mia?
I think that's when I started becoming aware of them and their work, and we became friends mostly through playing ping pong. But I wasn't super aware of the work they did until that they themselves did, not as presenters but as artists themselves, until a few years later. And our relationship has sort of evolved from being friends and admirers to being collaborators. So we've started working on projects together. So I've been working recently on their video piece, In a Strange Place.
Okay.
They've been going to forests all over the world, essentially. They've been in Germany and Norway, and now they're going to do some work in Alberta. And they've been filming forestry workers. He's probably told you about this, but
he was talking about it on the podcast for I think it was for Calgary art scene podcast, and he was talking about he's filming the. I'll let you finish, but yeah.
So he's there. He and Mia are filming essentially one shots of forestry workers, people that work in the forestry industry, mostly in sort of largely forest preservation and analysis. And Mia has created these beautiful stylized sort of animal masks that they all put on, and they do this slow, beautiful choreography in these forest backdrops. And it's really sublime and really cool, and requires from the viewer, a certain patience, and again, kind of this willingness to just submit to this image for quite a long period of time.
Yeah.
But then the screen breaks up into different squares of different performers or different participants with this beautiful forest backdrop. Anyway, they've asked me to compose music for these pieces. So these are 15 to 20 minute video pieces. And it's been fascinating because, I'm from a singer-songwriter background, a 3.5 minute, verse chorus, classic songwriting sort of structure. I haven't done a whole lot of just sound design composition. I've done a little bit, but working on that project with them has given me a whole new sense of what composition can be. It's gotten me, my chops going on the digital composing front a little bit, sampling things. And again, speaking of patience and what time means in art, is thinking of music as something that can really be most powerful when it builds slowly and carefully, and how to layer in sounds without getting too excited and thinking about, we have to have a new dynamic shift now. Like, no, how about wait a couple more minutes before that shift, So it's been really good for me to work with them on that project.
Yeah, build that anticipation.
Yeah, exactly.
And they also worked with you on a video for one of your most recent albums. You had a single, and they I watched that video too.
Yeah. So my recent sort of full-length release is called Songs for My Father to Fall Asleep To. And that was an attempt to do a full album of songs that were gentle, which again, similarly to working with Eric and Mia, it required me to do something that didn't seem natural at first, which was to relax, slow things down, be a bit quiet and whispery. Again, not feel that there needed to be any more energy than was inherent in the song. I made a point of performing and singing at the same time, so the recording is playing and singing simultaneously, which is something I hadn't really done before. And so, the whole album is essentially that, and it's recorded in a number of different locales: a church, the woods, my basement, different studios.
You recorded the music in all these different locales.
Yeah, I recorded all of the songs, basic tracks of playing and singing at the same time. So most of it's playing acoustic guitar and singing at the same time, or electric and singing. So that's usually the base of it. And then I invited some other guests. And then, so for the song I did called Wolves, which is essentially sort of a story, a fable about a girl who escapes a girl who was raised by wolves, who is captured by the city folk and brought to the city and forced to work in a restaurant, and then escapes with her friends, goes back to the forest. The villagers come back to try to retrieve the girls, and they see that they're doing fine without them, and they just go back. And so it's very simple, but very, for me, evokes a little something of the. I think I was inspired a little by the youth climate movement, by the Greta Thunberg kind of feeling of the idea of the young, in a sense, feeling abandoned by the older generation, and and finding ways to cut free from them, to cut loose from them. That sort of loosely, I think, the inspiration. And so because it was for me, it was a very visual story. The idea came quite early of getting school children to draw the pictures of each line of the song, or each half line, and then have it be scrolling pictures. It's not a new idea. It turns out that Raffi did that with Baby Beluga. So I was a little disappointed to find that out. But anyway, I figure sometimes you can come up with an original idea like someone else comes up with, like when the radio was invented. And so after I had all these beautiful child's drawings in my hands, I didn't really know how best to execute the video. Eric and Mia are wonderful again in the precision of their aesthetic and how elegant their video work is. And so they captured each of the images, and then Mia spent hours and hours actually animating each of the images to make them move and whatnot. And so, I thought it was pretty beautiful to have them as part of that project.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you guys all live in a co-op, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's so neat to get to live with a bunch of other artists and kind of like have that community right there built in.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty magical. I don't know of anything like that. Well, actually, there's a place called The Brewery in downtown LA where I think it's a bunch of artists living together.
Well, I mean, the great thing about the co-op is it's not just artists. I mean, there are definitely some, but it's people of all walks of life, all backgrounds, all occupations, a lot of kids, which is great, of different age groups. So it's a great place to raise a kid. So no, it's true. It's lovely. And definitely what you get the sense is, even if people aren't artists themselves, there seems to be that kind of cultural appreciation, that's because, everyone sort of has a social mandate in their lives. They want to be part of a group. And so that tends to be followed by an appreciation of the artistic impulse, because essentially that's what art does, so
right.
It is lovely.
And art can like bring communities together. I think if you're going to live in a co-op type situation, you already have to kind of want to be a part of a community and like not have that kind of like selfish mindset of just like, oh no, me, I want what's best for me. Right. So it kind of like you get to, everyone probably has that idea of like, no, I want to belong to something. And like, obviously it's co-op, everything is shared, or the community is a shared community.
Yes.
So it's like you get the benefit of like the communal living, but without the trauma of a cult.
Yeah,
you
trust
to
me.
Send your kid to therapy
sometimes it feels like a cult. And sometimes when you're trying to have your coffee and you see that Eric is looking at you from his patio into your kitchen window, you're like, yeah, hi.
With his beady eyes, I could just see him staring at you.
And his cat in his arms.
Intentionally trying to creep you out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, that happens all the time. I mean, it is lovely in many ways. I mean, obviously it's not, nothing is ever as idyllic as you imagine. What ends up happening is some people, a lot of folks get into a place like a co-op and it's like, oh, cheap rent. And then they sort of, hermit up and don't really do any volunteering or engage very much. Yeah. So you get a lot of that. And I think one of the challenges of a co-op is motivation, is how do you actually motivate engagement, without seeming dictatorial. It's a tricky thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
But what ends up happening is like any group of 100 people or more is you can't help but find your kind of clique of close people and close friends and people who you do share that sort of ideal with. about what it should be, and then whoever wants to come into that fold is more than welcome. But you can't force it.
I've been listening to. I recently discovered that the Libby app allows you to use your library card to check out audiobooks, and so I've been listening to a ton of audiobooks in my car. And one of the books, I believe it was either Malcolm Gladwell or Adam Grant. I've been on a kick with those two authors, and they were talking about the rule of 150. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell. He's talking about the tipping point.
Right.
It was in the book, The Tipping Point, and the rule of 150. And basically, there's kind of like a general rule of like, when you get a group more than 150 people, then our brains kind of like can't maintain connections beyond 150 people. And so like, I don't know, you were talking about like you've got like 100 people, like so that sounds like it's kind of like an ideal situation where, you know, you kind of naturally people are going to form their own like subgroups, but but
you're right, it's relatively manageable. And actually that's one of the cool things about Eric, because he's a bit extroverted compared to me and Deborah, and so he's always having tea and coffee and going for walks with everybody and just trying to like facilitate that sense of community. Like personally, he's trying to get that going. So he kind of knows who everybody is. Whereas Deborah and I, especially since having our little one, have found it a little bit harder to do that.
It's so hard when you have kids to like find the balance of taking care of yourselves, taking care of your relationship with mom and dad, doing your work, pursuing your passions, and then also finding time for your kids and social lives outside of the family. It's so challenging.
Oh yeah. But at the same time, like things, I don't know if you found this, but things become almost distilled. Like you can almost see them on a chart. Like, these are my priorities. These are the things I need to do. This is the sequence in which I need to do them. Like things start to actually become clearer in some ways because your time and energy becomes so in demand and limited in some ways. You have to prioritize. You can't kind of flit about like you used to before you had that, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like you really do have to prioritize your time. Time management becomes so huge. And then you start to realize like when, you know, before you had children, how much time you actually had that you didn't make use of. You're like, wow, I took my time for granted back then.
Oh yeah.
I think it's also like when you get over 40 too. Like I know for me, like after the age of 40, I really have like started being okay with telling people, no, I'm so sorry. I won't be able to do that thing for you, or I won't be able to make it to that thing as much as I want to. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And it used to be that I would make the excuse that I was sick. And now I just say, sorry, can't do it. And everybody sort of implicitly knows that that's because there's something family related or whatever. But it's nice to be beyond that, where you feel you have to lie. You can just sort of say, yeah, this cannot happen right now. But at the same time, what I am finding, even, you know, as after year 2, I'm trying to realize that going out and seeing a show, taking an hour and seeing somebody's new gallery release of visual art, or seeing a dance show, or seeing something, even if it's just like really surgical, even if you just go in and do it and leave again, is actually is valuable and important, and that you can't sacrifice, and that, you know, as much as you can, you still have to build in that, not just doing your own art, but that appreciation of others' work. Otherwise, you know, I think your life just sort of creatively stagnates a little bit. So I'm trying to encourage Deborah to do the same thing. It's like, oh, you've got some literary folk doing something, just go, like, do it. Because it becomes too easy to excuse yourself from things. So that's another part of the whole balance question.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you become socially anorexic. Like it's
Totally.
easier to just isolate yourself and it feels safe. And it's easy to get into that stage. My husband and I my husband is a structural engineer. So by trade, he's not an artist, but he's a musician, even though he's like, I barely can play. And I'm like, yeah, you just like listen to music and then you figure it out on the guitar.
Yeah.
You're a musician.
Yeah. I hate that.
Like, stop denying yourself.
Yeah.
But he and I like really have been making efforts to make sure that we each kind of get some time during the week. Yeah. Whether that's I have a cousin that lives nearby and I'll go visit her on a weeknight. We call it book club, but really we just binge watch some TV show together.
Yeah.
And then he goes skateboarding either Saturday or Sunday morning, and he gets to go for a few hours and go get his skateboarding. That's like where he finds some happiness. And like we both need that reset and that time away from the family structure.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it is easy to get into that kind of sacrifice mindset that it's like, I am giving of myself to this new life, and it's the only, it's easy to convince yourself that that's all you are now. It's just kind of like a feeding tube for emotionally and.
But then it implodes. It will implode eventually.
That's the thing. Yeah. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back and I want to understand how you started on your creative journey. Like what started you into music? And I know that you've done some acting as well. So
my father, Wilfred, was a visual artist. He was an art teacher, but also a really beautiful, accomplished artist. And he always had a very free and open philosophy about what creating art meant. He would always tell his students to imagine that you're a Neanderthal in a cave with a piece of ochre, and what will you put on that wall? You have no reference points. He was really big on not relying on reference on other artists as reference. He's responsible essentially for giving me a creative impulse, but also the idea that creativity in general should be joyful. It should be fun. It should be something for you. And if other people enjoy it, great. That was that kind of sense. And it didn't really manifest for me in visual art. I never felt comfortable with visual creation, even though he tried so hard. He would take me and my sister to McDonald's, and we always sort of felt of two ways about it, because we knew that we were going to get a burger, but we also knew that he was then going to take us back to his art room at his school on a Sunday and make us turn the containers into puppets or something. Like, we always had to do something creative with everything. Everything was a creative experiment, which is hilarious, and it's beautiful. But for me, it didn't manifest in like a passion until music came along.
Okay.
And that happened, at about 14, when it was one of those things that's connected with friendship. Essentially, one buddy got a keyboard for Christmas, the other got a drum set. I got my old guitar out of my mom's closet. It's like, let's start a band. So it was that notion of just getting together and seeing if you could, make a racket. Because for years before, we would just air band with tennis rackets to Men at Work songs, in the basement.
Yeah.
And when we started to actually perform music together, even though it was, I didn't know how to tune a guitar, and it was usually really, our songs were all too busy and overwrought and whatnot. It was so much fun, and it was so exhilarating. And even to have like another friend or two in the basement to listen to you blast through Crocodile Rock and have them go, wow, that's amazing. To get that feedback, it just, once the spark is ignited, it's there. It doesn't go anywhere. And so I brought into that band that same philosophy of my dad's, which was, explore that instrument. Don't think of it in a totally conventional sense. Don't think about lyrics that I've heard from pop songs that I've loved. Don't try to imitate that. Try to think about what are the things I want to say. So I think even from an early time, once I figured out 3 chords, I wanted to start writing songs, which is probably why my guitar playing isn't that strong, is because I was so interested in putting together melody and lyric from a very, very early time. So different bands early on. I went to Europe when I was 21 and busked for a couple of years on the streets, and I think that was probably what defined my sound and my songwriting technique. Because when you're on the street, the only way to get people's attention is to kind of be fast and loud. So there was a lot of kind of, we would do something which was called like buskifying songs. So we would take a ballad or something, and we would just put it boom to put a beat to it, and that would get people's attention. And I traveled with a guy who played bongos, so we had a nice big sound. And when I came back to Calgary from those couple of years in Europe busking, I sort of transferred that sound to the stage and did open stages and started to, my own song started to gel a bit more. And so those early years were definitely straight out of the kind of, I'd say, folk pop singer songwriter kind of realm. But even early on, like, I think my sound was often defined by people who were interested in my work by the lyrics and the content of the lyrics. They tended to be storytelling songs. They tended to be lyrically very descriptive and very evocative. I probably packed way too many words into songs than I needed to. But that ended up being my signature thing. And so people who appreciated that, especially, and this was nice, people in like folk festivals, which are great places to play music because people are listening. They're really digging lyrics. They're really invested in that kind of folk tradition. They're
there for the music, not just to get drunk.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, and that was that I ended up doing relatively early, and that was very gratifying. And then I did many years of obviously bar stuff and full band stuff where you're competing with people playing billiards and getting wasted and stuff, and your people are throwing things at you. But I mean, that's all part of that's fine too. Because there's something exhilarating about that too, about trying to play a song that means something to you with people on stage with you while people aren't listening, while people are doing other things, because you have to transcend that somehow. You have to find a way to enjoy the moment and to enjoy the song without needing a pin to drop and everybody to so I was able to experience both sides of those things relatively early, which was lovely. That's really cool.
And so then it sounds like music is kind of more your focus in general.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the root of that's sort of my base talent in a way is music and songwriting. And I think what ended up happening, and it was a very natural progression or evolution, it probably because my songs often had characters in them, stories in them, I started getting asked by local theater companies to participate in collaborative theater works. And that would usually then lead me to going into a process where it was, okay, we need a song where, this character is meeting this character and they have to, go on a plane. And so I was sort of enlisted to write commission pieces for theater. Often I would perform in those things as well. So I started to get more comfortable with stage performance in a theater realm, and also more comfortable with the theater process itself, which is much more strict and regimented than a singer-songwriter or a band. It's like, you got to be there at 9:45 to do your yoga before you start the rehearsal process.
Warm up your whole body.
But I didn't mind that. I kind of liked that. Maybe it's the half German in me, but I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I like being on time. And so the music sort of bled into the theater, which bled into acting, which then sort of again segued into a few different film projects as well, where I was hired primarily as an actor. So what kind of prepared me for that was in some ways kind of cool. It was like the in between stage banter when you're a musician on stage, where you're filling up 3 minutes in between a song with a story about what you're talking about, and you're kind of half stand-up comic and half storyteller, but you have to inhabit a different type of personality than when you're playing the song itself. So it's kind of like all of these different tools started being sharpened as time went on, but I'd say when it comes to projects that are like self-generated and self-motivated, it's always music that I get most excited about, think most about, imagine what I can do and where I can go with it next.
It's such a blessing that your dad instilled that idea of just like making the art for yourself. I know many artists, and myself included, like for so much of like my artistic journey was like wanting to use the art to seek validation and like to get like that gold star, like, oh, you're doing this good thing. And rather than just like creating it and enjoying it for myself. And that's kind of been more of my focus lately. And especially I've had to go back into like a full-time job, like a regular office job. And so truly the art is like now there just as like just for me.
Yeah.
Which is, it kind of, it makes it, oh my God, what's the word? I'm not innocent, but like less tainted or, like, yeah.
It's weird. It's a strange thing because like it's I mean, there's another side to that. I mean, I'm the same as my father. I'm a lousy self-promoter. Like when you're not obsessed enough with the commercial, and when you're sort of you become, but you're still forced into the commercial realm because that's sort of where presentation of work lives. You can't help but be, I feel I'm still way too self-conscious to just know how to sell something that I think is good, but that I don't think I should be selling, but that I know I need to. So it's a weird dichotomy. I still feel enormously uncomfortable with it. Having said that, something is working because I've been, working as an artist exclusively for almost 30 years. So whatever paths I'm going on, don't think I don't dream of that hit, or that amazing commission, like everybody does, like everybody would in any occupation, right? You want that sweet gig, and you want that recognition, not for ego, but just to get that sense that what you're doing is having impact on other people, because that is what sharing of art is. I mean, my dad created so much beautiful art. It's in homes around the world. I always bring his stuff to different places. So it's in Australia and it's in Europe and it's all over Canada, and people really deeply value it. And in many ways, I believe that is success in my mind, right? I don't know if that even mattered to him to even use that word, if that's even, so I try to always return to that philosophy, but it's hard to do when the way the world is judged and perceived is on some form of commercial success. But yes, to your point, I do consider it a gift that I can keep returning to his idea of what art means, and realize that it's probably that philosophy that's allowed me to say yes to all these really cool theater projects and all these other things, and to branch off into different worlds. Like that's probably that openness is what's allowed that to happen.
How does it work in Canada? Do you guys have is it like you guys have music studios here the way that we do here? Because it seems like your albums are like independently produced. I assume you're producing them on your own, or is there like a label that you kind of go through?
I've released about 10 recordings at least of original music, and I'll usually either finance them through grants or through my own money. I'll often go into like a professional recording studio to do it. Usually, the fellow musicians and the engineer there will help produce it. But Yeah, I mean, that's in a way one of the reasons that probably I I I could allow myself to be open to going into other art realms was because from an industry perspective, I was never definable. And so I
Yeah.
never got industry support. Like even though I would be playing the Edmonton Folk Festival and the Winnipeg Folk Festival and Guelph and Ontario and you know and touring around and getting a lot of radio play on CBC and a lot of independent radio stations, there were no labels that had a clue, I think, what to do with it's the guy who does a little bit of everything, you know.
Yeah.
It's like here's a couple of rockers, and then here's a nice
Yeah.
quiet song, and then here's like a spoken word semi rap song, and it's like that's how I love to create was to even within the same recording have a lot of different styles. I mean, I know that artists get away with that and then they still get popularity, but I think from the mixture of the fact that it was confusing as far as how to promote me from an industry standpoint and the fact that I was a shitty self-promoter, I think it just made it that it was easier for me just to stay independent, do it myself. Again, then I had complete control over whatever I did. But it also was frustrating from that industry perspective, and that I could never, if you want to survive as a touring singer songwriter, you have to be able to go from city to city and be playing to at least 200 or 300 people before you could to just make that revenue of ticket sales and merchandise to be able to make it a career. And so probably for me now, like touring music and recording music is maybe a third of kind of what I do. And then theater and film and then other side projects would be the other 2/3.
It's such a challenge to make money in music these days, especially because it does sound like from the musicians that I know, you really make your money in touring.
Yeah.
And it's harder to do when you've got a family, the older you get.
Yeah.
Unless you're like a megastar and you can, that's like a different world. It's almost like a different business we're talking about, when you're an independent person, an independent musician versus,
No, you're absolutely right. And and it's true. The challenges, like after it's great fun from 20 to 33, going to Saskatoon in the middle of winter and sleeping on someone's floor while their dog clicks around on the hardwood floor while you're trying to sleep. Like, oh, that's so fun. Right. And then you hit 30 and then 1 year later, you're 34 and you're going, we're getting a hotel. But then, then all the money you've made from the gig goes to the hotel. So, it's like, there comes a point where, there's just a cutoff and you're like, okay, I'll take the sweet gigs when they come. I'll take the festivals where it's really comfortable and there's good hospitality and you're like, that's what I want. And that's fair enough. Yeah. That's totally normal. And like you say, that other echelon of of sort of, star world is it's a different business for sure. And of course, I mean, I know I have a lot of folk band friends in the country who have, label deals and get good crowds. They're not huge. They're like mid-level. So maybe they are doing that 150 to 200 sort of room, but they will still tour and they'll bring a nanny on tour. It's usually a friend that they're not paying a lot of money, but they're paying them, and it's to take care of their kid or two that they bring on the road. Yeah. A lot of them, it's like a lot of them, that's still so important to them that they're just, even if they make no money on the tour, they just really want to make it an experience for themselves, for their kids, and they want to play their music for people, and they don't, and if they can afford to do it, they'll do it. So there is a way to still do that on that middle spectrum as well.
And it sounds like you were saying that some of the funding you were able to get through grants, was that through the Canadian government?
Some of it. So there are different, like I know early on there was a granting agency called Factor, which was specifically for music, popular music. Mm-hmm. That's where I got my first couple of grants. There's a specifically Alberta one, Alberta Foundation for the Arts, Calgary Granting Organization, and then there's the Canada Council for the Arts, which is the national. And I find that in order to get funding through them, and the reason that I probably am able to do that is that they like projects, musical projects that have a local specificity. So something that is. So one of my albums was a spoken word album called "The Guilt and the Shame: Tales of the Canadian West," and it was all sort of like stories about the Calgary suburbs and the streets and the things that I'd experienced, but kind of the less flattering aspects of Western life, but still tongue in cheek to some degree and a lot of humor. But that was, that was funded because I think it was considered something that was like culturally valuable, as opposed to like, here are my commercial pop songs about being in love or falling out of love, right? That's not going to get funding. So I think, and in some ways, maybe the way, maybe to some degree I was writing those grants to because I thought, it's not, I never find it difficult. Like I was never forcing a round peg in a square hole. I wanted to write those things, and I just had to tailor the grant to make it appealing to the granting agencies. And I've been able to do that.
That's really neat though, that I was going to call them states, provinces, right?
Yes. Yes. Nicely done.
Oh my gosh. Your provinces and the government in general offer that kind of support for the arts. Obviously
absolutely.
The US is in a tough spot right now, but even before where we're at now, that was like never like really a thing. We're like still just struggling to get the arts back into our schools.
Isn't that wild? Oh God.
It's wild. And then I was just reading this morning that now Italy is considering taking away grants and tax exemptions or reductions, credits for film and television over there. And I was reading they have a more right-wing government kind of in place right now, and so they're kind of looking at cutting that stuff, which is
they're downright fascist. I mean,
are they?
Oh yeah, I mean, and then that's the thing. That's the first thing fascists do is they know who their enemy is, and their enemy is artists and intellectuals, and so they're going to do everything to cut off their supply of resources and funding, so that they won't have any critics. It's a pretty blatant tactic, right? To just have a more submissive population. It's gross. It's just brutal, and it's happening everywhere. And I mean, our Alberta government wants to do the same thing. Luckily, we have we have a good arts lobby, and a relatively good political lobby in the opposition. But it's a constant battle. It's there. The conservative influence is always trying to undermine the arts and arts funding. I mean, some people will argue that the granting model has its flaws, and that what happens with some career artists is they get grants, but there's nothing other than making a final report saying I did this. They're not really forced to, or even really encouraged to, ways of finding ways to disseminate their work or to actually get it out there in the world. So what you end up having too are, millions of hours of time spent collectively creating films that nobody sees, in theater that has one run and is never done again. And so there's, some would argue that if it's more of a dog eat dog commercial model, you need to find an audience, and that's up to you to do, whether it's through some sort of industry support or completely on your own. I don't particularly agree with that. I think that you can do both. I think you can support it and help disseminate and promote it. But I'm just saying that's kind of one of the other ways of looking at it, is that sometimes it depends on what you think the purpose of art in a community is. And I personally think it's okay if art is more ephemeral, if it just happens. It doesn't have to always, last or have a run on Broadway. It can be just done, and it can be for the artists themselves to get better and to learn and to grow, so that perhaps their next project will have even more potency than their previous one, right? We have to think of things as a trajectory. And I mean, that used to be something that even happened in the music industry. I mean, when REM was signed to a big label in the 80s, it took them 3 albums to have a hit. Tom Petty, same thing. I remember him saying that the record company just, gave them a house and all this time to work to find their sound. Like that wouldn't happen now. You have to come out of the gates with a hit or you're nothing. And if you don't have another hit after that first hit, then you're dropped. So that idea of kind of nurturing artistry is kind of lost on the industry now. And that's what's kind of nice about having at least a flow of money coming from the grant stream, so that a good artist can keep working and not be completely stressed out about how am I going to pay my rent every single month. They still are, of course, but
yeah, they call it the like first pancake theory, right? Like the first pancake comes out terrible.
Yeah.
But then like you keep making the pancakes and then you get the hang of it and it comes out right. And I think that's like in terms of the US, and of course it affects Canada as well, because so many US productions are going to Canada to shoot. Yeah. But like the studios, so many of these studios are now controlled by Wall Street.
Right.
And so the people who are kind of making the decisions, they don't understand what it's like, what the process is. And so they have that expectation of like, we'll just get it done.
Yeah.
We just want to see results immediately. Yeah. And, even with pilots, I mean, so many TV shows I've watched the first episode, I was like, it's okay. But then you keep watching the next couple episodes and they find their rhythm.
Totally.
Or like seasons of TV shows. To me, Parks and Rec, the first season was okay. Yeah. But the second season, it's hilarious and they really find their stride. Yeah. But if you get someone who's like a tech bro, not to like put all the tech bros in one category, but that tends to be like who's starting to control this stuff. They've gotten into a business that they don't understand. Yeah. They've gotten into an industry that they don't understand. It's not like building a website. It's not a startup in that way. Mm-hmm. There's you have to have that room for the growth and the discovery of the story. And that's what a lot of the writer's strike was about, was because they were trying to force the writers to come into like create these stories in a vacuum, in a bubble with fewer writers. Right. And they lost that. You have a big room of writers because some people are good at story and some people are good at character and some people are good at punching up the script with the jokes or whatever. Yeah. And then they would shut down the writer's room when they would go to film. And so they would lose continuity whereas in the past it had been that the writer's room is running alongside the production. Yeah. And so they can like jump in and say, no, you can't do that because remember in episode 4, this happened.
Yeah.
So, or when they need that last minute change on the set, like, we need a better line. If you've only got one guy, maybe that's not his specialty.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the cost cutting doesn't always work. And it happens in every business.
Of course.
And, but.
Yeah. Well, I know. Yeah. And the same thing. If you do that at a meat packing plant, someone cuts off their arm, it's like you can't, if you're cutting corners all the time. And if, we find the same thing here with privatization of industries. Once you make it private, it's all about cost cutting, which always means, losing staff, which always means a worse service. Always. Yeah. It's always the same. Always. But more profit for the 100 people on the top. And and of course that doesn't work. We know that. So it's a battle that's hard to know, where to even start to fight, because it seems like everyone except the workers themselves are in cahoots, which is why things like unions are still so important in all these industries, because how else are you going to have any clout whatsoever?
Yeah.
People don't like going on strike. People don't want to do that. They really don't.
No.
It sucks,
no.
So yeah, I totally know what you mean. And you're right. I think that's probably why a lot of American productions are coming up here. We're getting a lot of work here in Calgary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Fraggle Rock, for coming up here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to ask you more about your process. I know we're running out of time, but as you have grown older, like how do you feel like your music is changing or your process is changing? Um, and do you, I don't know. I guess I know how age affects my art. I'm wondering how that's affect your experience.
Well, one of the things that becomes that you become acutely aware of as you get older, when when you're young, there is a certain brashness and confidence and a sense that you kind of know what you're doing. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that sort of, it shouldn't be that way, but and that comes with youth. Is that the exuberance and confidence that comes with like early successes and and submitting into the world of being an artist. It just makes you feel like, yeah, I can kind of do anything. And in some ways you do, and that can serve you well. But then as you get older, I think you just realize that you will never come close to being an expert in anything. Like even just
Mm.
guitar playing. Like I found myself the last 2 years just watching YouTube videos about different guitar stylings and finger picking and even learning scales, which I never flippin' learned how to do, or the voice as an instrument. I haven't even begun to figure out what my voice can do or should do in a recording. So for me, I think what there's like a new level of excitement of discovery that in some ways I didn't have when I was younger, because I was just kind of coasting on youth, like just kind of on the fact that I would live forever and that I could do it. So in a way, along with that, the other things we've been talking about the preciousness of time,
Yeah.
it makes me realize that craft is fun. It's not, you know what I mean? It used to be all about inspiration and craft would come later. And then as you get older, you're going, wait, well, no, I can't actually forget about
Mm-hmm.
craft. I have to realize that I need to just get better at stuff. And by that I mean at instrumentation, at recording, at just exploring different sounds, even getting better at rudimentary keyboard. There are so many things in the musical realm itself that I need to discover and explore in order to generate that next wave of inspiration. So in order to get excited about writing a new bunch of songs, I find I need to to just spend more work and time
Yeah.
the on instrument craft. And so that for me is a kind of a different type of exhilaration, a different type of purpose. I think, also as I get older, I find more and more, I find joy out of any form of collaboration. I love just locking creative heads and horns with somebody, especially of a different discipline. I think it's so much fun. I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting. It takes me places that I would never expect to go. I've been
Yes.
working a lot in recent years with
Mm-hmm.
a group in Calgary called Making Treaty 7 Cultural Society. So it's an arts society, multi-arts society that brings together theater performers, visual artists, dancers, and musicians from the First Nations community. So from the Blackfoot, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, and the settler community. And that, by settler, it could be Western European, it could be
Mm-hmm.
Chinese, Japanese, African American, African Canadian. It brings them all together, and we put on performances, and they're usually multidisciplinary theater performances. But just in the last 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
getting my ear used to the beauty of indigenous drumming and singing, and just trying to physically inhabit the rhythm, which is most of the
Mm-hmm.
rhythm
Mm-hmm.
is heartbeat based, which is gorgeous. Some of it on the big powwow drums is just can be so beautifully fierce and
Yeah.
aggressive, but also with the harmonies going over top of it, these strange, interesting, disparate harmonies, and the voices coming in at really unusual times. I joke with them, it's like prairie jazz, It's like it's you hear it at a festival or at the Calgary Stampede, and it sounds like it's hard to understand. It sounds like something that's meant to be like window dressing to your day at the carnival. But when you're actually there with the musicians and you're seeing them perform and breaking the songs down, it's given me again a whole level of non-understanding that I find exciting, right? It's so I see, you can sort of see when you have these popular or famous musicians going into like, I want to write a classical symphony, or I want to go into jazz or whatever. You realize it's not just a conceit; it's an actual passion that they want to discover something different after doing one thing for a while. So I think again, as I get older, I realize, for whatever time I have left to discover new things, I want to I think I want to try to, and not particularly become an expert at anything else. I mean, I'm still just going to do what I can do relatively well, and try to make a living at it. But even just to dip my toe into some new pools is I know that's going to be something that I'm going to be looking for. I'll be seeking that out. I'll be seeking out just different experiences.
Yeah, I think the age thing too, when you start something new, is like, what do you have to lose? There's less weight on it. It doesn't hurt to try it. And if you want to drop it, you can drop it. But you might find something that adds value to your life or to your other pieces of art or whatever. But there's like, why not? What do you have to lose?
Exactly. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So anyway, that's interesting. So it's almost full circle. There's almost this new level of like when you're young, it's like, it's not that it doesn't matter, because I mean, what matters and what doesn't matter is completely subjective. But it is kind of a renewed sense of excitement in a way, about what art can do, just for your own health, your own emotional health outside of anything else. It still feels really, really good to practice something. So those are, I see it continuing in those directions, and hopefully and still saying yes to stuff that comes along that may seem strange or may seem that I don't fit. I'll keep saying yes to stuff. I've always been good at that.
That's a good way to live. That's a good rule. Okay, so then I'm going to ask you my final question, which is, what does making it mean to you now versus when you were younger? So what would success look like to you now?
When my friends and I were 14 and 15 and playing our instruments in my buddy's basement, we wanted to be, by the turn of the new millennium, we wanted to be U2, basically. Because Joshua Tree was just out. They were the biggest band in the world. They seemed like they were high school friends that had become big together. And that's what we wanted to be. We wanted to be basically the biggest band in the world by the year 2000. And it was no joke. Like that was the notion of making it. And again, it wasn't, of course, certain things play into it. Like, I don't want to have a real job. I want, being famous looks like it feels good. It'd be great to have lots of money. But very honestly, we were always very sentimental about music. It meant so much to us. It moved us so much that we wanted to move other people in that same way. We wanted people to just, react to what we created the same way that we reacted to music. That was what we wished for. And then of course that did not happen. The other friends continued playing music. I continued playing music. We remained friends, and we followed our own paths, but always stayed connected. And probably for me, what morphed over time, and, was I realized that back to kind of my dad's philosophy of it, I realized that making it was doing it. So just the very act of actually being able to I think, and probably I did this late 20s, early 30s, is I put down the drywall cutting knife and I said, that's it. I'm not going to do anything else again. I submitted. I kind of gave in to saying whatever I can do, and this has to do with so many other different life decisions. It has to do with deciding to live in a co-op. It has to do with deciding not to buy a new car. It has to do with making many decisions in your life to accommodate not making a lot of money. Let's be honest. For a while, I said, this is what I need to do, and I think once I made that decision, then there was like a weight off. I said, okay, however hard it is, and even if I have some months where I'm panicking because I don't have a contract coming in or I'm not getting any gigs, I'm not gonna go back. That giving in was, in a way, for me, a success. To be able to be able to say that, to be able to actually have enough resiliency within me to say, I'm not going back. I'm going to continue being an artist no matter what. And that decision, making it very clear to myself, has benefited me, because it has led to all these different things. And I think, this sounds cheesy, but to be very honest, so much of a life in the arts is that notion of social currency. It's that notion that I can text 20 different people in Victoria or in Toronto or in Edmonton and say, I'm coming up for a visit. Let's meet for lunch. And it's somebody that I could have played a festival with 15 years ago and had one night around the fire with, passing around a bottle of Jameson, and they're still my friends. You know what I mean? It's really weird. It's really cool how that gels relationships. It makes it harder because as you get older, people start dying, and then you start feeling like shit because you realize, oh, damn it, I have like 200 really good friends. So I'm going to have to mourn them, and they're going to have to mourn me. I feel like I've spent my last 15 years of my life in mourning. But besides that is for me success. So, I recently had my release party for Songs from My Father to Fall Asleep to, and the 100 people that were in this small theater that had packed this place were all people almost that I could look at and say, I've shared a beautiful time with almost every single one of you. And it was really, really special, because it made me feel better about being here in Calgary, which is can be a frustrating place to live sometimes, politically and socially even. But that for me felt like success, and that happened, a month ago, and that felt really, really beautiful. And so I think, I think that difference between the youth imaginings of making it, let's be honest, they're based on fabrications, because you haven't been there yet. You can't know what that is until you're either there. And then I've, because it's bizarre too, because I've had a lot of friends over the years who have quote unquote made it and then been depressed for 5 years because they don't know what it means, and they doesn't feel satisfying. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you see that and you're like, well, is that what I want? So there aren't, we know from experience and from observation that we can't be guaranteed happiness. So therefore, again, making it a success has got to be, by making it, I kind of like the idea that like you've made it, as though you've made it up a mountain and back down again without dying. Like it's not in a way, making it as a success, it's surviving. And I think if you can get to a later point in your life and feel relatively healthy, relatively well-adjusted, relatively happy, like you kind of have your shit together, and that you're still hopeful, then that's all you can hope for.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think that's it. I get so many different definitions to this question. And I think overall the idea is just, yeah, are you healthy? Are you happy? Do you have a community? Are you making things that you want to be making? Are you participating in art and life in the way that you want to? And a lot of times
Yes.
that's just, yeah.
I mean, I'll just add one caveat to that, is that a lot of my thoughts recently have been going towards how can I use my talents to be an activist, to be more socially active, as far as actually trying to influence and change some of the really frightening and dismaying patterns that we're seeing in you can say it's in politics, but that's not
It's just in
the
the
politics.
world.
It bleeds into the world. You've seen there's a social construction that has happened in the U.S. especially, and it's bled up into Canada too, where the mixture of ultra right wing conservatism has infiltrated all levels of life, schools, workplaces, and it needs to be combated. I don't see it as let's all try to get along and find what we have in common. Well, that would be great. But I think it's gotten to a point where I have to write some more pointed satire.
Yeah.
As if that's going to fucking do anything. But you know what I mean? But I'm actually thinking, because what could be done? What can an artist do? What can an artist do to do something that can help change policy while still creating good art? Because that's hard.
Yeah.
But I think about like the old tradition of union songs in the States in the 30s and 40s, of even protest music in the 60s. There was some good stuff. There was some not great stuff, but that doesn't matter. The fact is there was that impulse to do it, and there was that sense of urgency that something needed to be written and performed in order to challenge the system. And I mean, I know it still happens a lot in rap and hip hop, especially the more non-commercial stuff. That tends to be the protest music of today. But I would like to find out how I can do more of that myself. And I've always done that. So it's not like I've always done that in my own way. Yeah. But I kind of feel like having a whole YouTube channel devoted just to protest songs that are funny and interesting and well crafted, but that pick a new enemy every day. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking my future success will be based on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, these are the times.
These are the times.
Yeah. It's been so great talking to you, Kris. I'm really glad that you agreed to do this with me. And I feel like, with the exception of Mia, but I know she's not one to like do interviews. I've had the pleasure of like bringing your little clan.
Yeah.
To the show.
Our little clan have all been represented.
Yeah. I'm hoping.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I hope one day I can come up there and visit you guys.
Please do.
Please do. Going back to that social currency that you're talking about, I haven't seen Eric in 20-something years in person.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
Yeah. So,
you must. Or
yeah. Oh, no. He came to California. That's right. Oh my gosh. I almost forgot. He came to California when I was married to my first husband. That would have been, we didn't have a kid yet. So I think that was probably 2007 or 2008. Yeah. Somewhere around. He and Mia did a road trip. And then I got to meet Mia at that time. They stayed with us, which was really nice to get to meet them.
Still 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah. It's still a long ass time. But I will say, also going back to the social currency, our other friend who I spoke of earlier, Adam Shakanowski, I had him on the show. And then I met a woman through a woman on Instagram. I had done a class with this woman and I wanted to have her on the show. I'm still trying to get her on the show, but she referred me to one of her friends. So I had that friend on the show. And then I ended up introducing her and Adam because they're both in London.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you guys should connect. And they did. And then she just did his show. He has a show in London called One Track Minds.
Mm-hmm.
And she just did that. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this friendship of 20 something years led to this thing. And so another definition of success is connecting other artists with artists to help them grow. And that's,
absolutely.
it's an unintended consequence of this podcast, but I love it so much.
That's wonderful.
It feels very magical. Anyway.
It is. Yeah. It's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Do you want people to follow you on social media? I can't remember if you're private.
No, they of course can. I'm not really on. I'm not on a lot of stuff. I have a Facebook artist page just under Kris Demeanor, and my Instagram, which is I think K Demeanor or something like that. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember what it is.
Well, you'll have to stay tuned for the show notes, and I will confirm it. But I think
that would be great.
Right.
But definitely, please, I'm going to start.
It's Kris.Demeanor.
Kris.Demeanor. Well, there we go. So please follow me on Instagram at Kris.Demeanor and on my Facebook artist page. Yeah. And I'm staying off X for now. I don't know. I've just never been good at that.
I was on Twitter, but then I just stopped going there. Yeah. It was so great chatting with you. Thank you so much for giving me your time.
No problem at all. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode. You can follow Kris on Instagram at Kris with a K, KRIS.Demeanor, DEMEANOR. Check out his music on Spotify, Amazon Music, or Apple, or check out his music videos on his website, KrisDemeanor.com. All of this is linked in the show notes. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a sweet little review. If you're really enjoying the show and you want to help cover the hosting costs, buy me a coffee at the link in the show notes. Subscribe wherever you listen, and please share the show with your friends. We love some word of mouth. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at MakingItAfter40, the number 40, and to catch up on what I'm doing when I'm not podcasting, check out my Instagram at Lisa Rodriguez. Thanks again for listening, and have an excellent week.